Hello there. How are we all doing tonight? If you're watching live, come say hi in chat. Good job, Nightbot. Working very well, I see. How's everybody doing? Oh, I'm quite excited for the stream. Been looking forward to it all weekend. Right, I've posted a link in chat about where the stream notes are going to go. So let's just take a quick look at those. Okay. For those of you who aren't aware of it, this is a program, well, this is a site called GitLab. And I'm going to just made some notes about what we're going to talk about today. So I've got some links in there and some reference files so I don't get lost with what we're doing. But yeah, cool. So today we're going to talk about Git. Who's excited for Git? As long as nobody ends up calling me a Git, I should be fine. But yeah, a little bit of background is that I've been using Git for a very long time. I've been using it for over 10 years. And yeah, I find sometimes when I'm talking to a few non-technical people, or you're working in teams, building video games, or doing a jam, people might be a bit intimidated by it. And so I'm going to try and help that out a little bit. So the stream's going to be about, you know, answering questions, a bit of a background of how Git works and how to use it with a Unity project, and how to like share code and yeah, just all that sort of stuff. And then if you've got any questions, I'll answer those, and then hopefully at the end of this I'll be able to like pick everything apart and edit like a quick video how to up for the future to go on the channel. That's my plan at least. So I think let's get cracking. Let me know if the music's too loud in the background. Should be fine though. Cool. Okay, right, first of all, Git. Git is a program for version control. So the way it works is that, actually, you know what, rather than talking about it, I'm just going to start showing it. Silver J, I'm listening, but I won't be able to chat much. Almost home. You go, Silver J. It's a long drive. Thanks for being with us. I'm glad I'm not talking just to the empty void. That's quite encouraging. But yeah, so what we're going to talk about today, general into Git as a game developer. We're going to talk about creating a Git repository for your Unity project. We're going to talk about how to exclude files from Git, and so basically say I don't want to track these files. We're going to talk about GitHub as a place of storing your Git repo, and we're going to talk about pushing and pulling, and basically storing stuff in Git and getting updates down if you're working in a team. So straight up, I'm just going to pull up a quick Unity project that I'm working on. And this is a very early prototype for a game that I'm working on with the Game Dev Field Guide. At the moment, we are doing a team jam, which is a 4-week jam where you get to work with a group of people you've never worked with before. You get assigned a team, and it's quite an interesting concept. I think it's a post-apocalyptic cat underground taxi driver game. So the world has ended. The overworld is uninhabitable. The cats have taken over. They live underground, and you play a taxi driver who picks up fares, and yeah, we'll see how it goes. But it's a fun little game we've been playing with. I'm just going to use this as like the demo project to work with today. So as you can tell, it's just a very simple Unity project. I've got some folders and some files and some assets, just the general stuff. And I've actually got a Git project already working in here. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of my Git project so that we can start from scratch, so to speak. So let's open this in a file navigator. So For those of you who are not aware, I'm using an operating system called Linux, but all of the stuff I'm going to be teaching today will transfer onto Windows and Mac as well. Git is a universal tool that works on all platforms. But if something looks a bit strange in what I'm doing, it's just because I'm on a different operating system. But yeah, I'm going to open the containing folder for my Unity project. And so basically you can see here, it's titled imaginatively GDFG17, and this is just the root of my project. Now I'm going to open the project root in a terminal, and I'm just going to quickly remove my Git project from this. So if I now run a git status command, oh, that didn't work. What have I done? Oh, of course, because I'm still in the Git root. Live coding, always a challenge. Just give me 1 second. Okay. A more experienced streamer might have prepared that rather than doing it live on stream. But there we are. So right, what we are doing now. So I've got a terminal open, and I'm in the directory that my Unity project is in. So if I use the ls command, that's just basically show me all of the files that you've got here. So you can see these are my Unity files in the terminal. Now, oh, I've actually got slides. Let's get some slides up. Okay, let's have a look. Is there a presentation mode for this? That'll have to do. Okay, so installing Git. We're going to skip installing Git. I'm just going to assume that you've already installed Git. If you don't know how to work that, just Google it. It's pretty straightforward. So we're going to talk about setting up Unity for version control. Okay, so we've got some steps to do that. We're going to configure Unity. And yeah, that makes sense. Let's do that. So I think most versions of Unity these days come with these settings pre-configured, but if for whatever reason they aren't, there's one particular thing that you need to do in your settings. Is it? That's not project settings, is it? Is it in preferences? I can't actually find them. Visible meta files, that's what the option's called. Why is it not finding it? Well, you know, this always happens when you're doing stuff live. Right. Unity 2021 visible meta file. Project settings, version control. I thought we just checked that. Right, so we're going to go into project settings, version control. Oh, there we go. Okay, so it is visible meta files by default. You probably don't want them to be hidden. And if you're using Perforce, then that's a different version control system. So that's different to what Unity does, to what you need to do for Git, but you want to do visible meta files. And basically what that does, and you've probably seen this before, but if you are working inside a Unity project, when you create all these files, it creates these meta files for all of the files in your project. And that's basically Unity saying information about those files that it can work with. So basically when you're dragging and dropping stuff in the editor and connecting images and scripts with your game objects, the meta files are what's happening behind the scenes, connecting everything and making sure that Unity knows what's going on. And you want those to be visible, because if you don't make those visible, then you can't track them. And if you try and share files with your friends and you haven't got the meta files included, it's just not going to work. It's just going to break. So from the get-go, you want to do that. And forcing text serialization, I mean, that's also a default file now. You don't actually have to do that. That should be fine. There's a link to a blog post. And that's it from that lecture. So that's Unity setup. Oh, I need some better slides. Okay, first commit. Okay, here we go. This is our first Git command. You guys ready? It's called Git Status. And this command basically just tells you what the current status of your files is. Now, if I type Git Status into my directory, it tells me not a Git repository or any of the parent directories. So we don't currently have a Git repository, and that is the correct place to be. Like from the start, Unity will not have one of those. So what we're going to do now is we're going to run our next command, and I hope I have a slide for it. And of course I don't have a slide for it. Okay, so I will be adding a slide for this. Great. But the next command, and this isn't really a command that you need to know very well because you're not going to be using it very often, but it's called Git Init, which is short for Git Initialize. And basically all it says, all that does is it means I want a Git project now. I want Git to work for this project. And what it says is it's initialized an empty Git repository in the directory that we're currently working in. And if you care to know what's just happened, it's created this directory called .git. Now it's a hidden directory, so if you look here, you can't actually see it. But if I choose to show hidden files, you can now see there's a folder here, .git. And there's lots of stuff in there, but you really don't need to know about any of this. You just ignore it. However, now if we run git status, it tells us some information. So it tells us we are on branch master, which is the default branch that gets created. It says we've got no commits yet, and we'll talk about commits in a second. And it tells us we have untracked files. Now we have a lot of untracked files. Basically every file in our directory, in our project, is currently untracked because we've not told Git that we want to track anything yet. But it also gives you helpful clues as well. So it says here, use git add file to include what would be committed. And it says here, nothing is added to commit, but untracked files present. Use git add to track. So Git is quite helpful. Git will always be trying to tell you what you need to do to move forward. So right now it's telling us we've got no tracked files, everything is untracked, but you can use a git add command to track files. So I'm going to take a quick second to talk about tracking. So Git by default doesn't make any assumptions. It doesn't know what files you want to keep, what files are unimportant, or what files you care about. It just follows your instructions. So you need to tell Git which files in your directory you want to backup, to version control, to track, to include in commits, and use the git add command for that. Now, if I were to type git add, it doesn't know what you want to add. So we haven't told it what to add. So we could tell it to add a specific file. So let's use this file here. It's called a GitHub CI file. So if I do git add and use that, no errors, but if I type git status again, it tells us now we have a tracked file. So we still have no commits, we're still on branch master, and we now have a file here. And all of our untracked files are still here, and it's now telling us use git rm -- cached file to unstage. So Git uses this state. Actually, we haven't actually tracked the file yet. What we've done is we've staged it. We've said this is a file that we would want to track. Lots of terminology there, but hopefully I can try and keep it really simple. So basically we've said, but to understand what tracking and staging and all is about, we need to talk about committing. And here's when a fear of commitment is not very helpful for you guys. So we're going to talk about committing files. And committing files is basically deciding to track something, deciding that changes should be permanent. So you're committing to some changes, basically. So the git commit command takes a bunch of arguments. You don't actually have to enter much other than that. You can just type git commit, and Git will ask you for any information that's still missing. So if I do git commit now, it pops up in a text editor. So the default text editor that it's using now, I think, is Nano, which is a text editor that comes with Ubuntu, but it could be any text editor. Basically what Git is asking you to do now is it's asking you to specify a message for your commit. So it's saying here, please enter the commit message for your changes. Lines starting with a hash will be ignored, and an empty message aborts the commit. So it's basically asking you, tell me what you've just done. A commit message is basically just a way for you to know what you have changed. It's like a reminder to yourself and others for the future. Now, I'm going to exit back out of this file. I'm not going to give it a file. I'm not going to give it a commit message, so I'm going to exit. And if I type git status again, nothing has changed. I've still got my file here that is staged. This will be included in the commit when I type git commit. So git commit. And if I don't want to have that text editor pop up and have to write into that, I can use -m to write a message myself. So I'm going to write a message now saying, I am committing a file. I'll type git status again. Git status is your favorite command. You want to run that very often. Great. Now you will notice in the previous git statuses, we had a message saying no commits yet. That's just a reminder saying it's a completely empty project. We've now made a commit. And so that message has gone away. Hello from Norway. Chippergoo. Nice, nice of you to join us. I'm just in the middle of doing a simple run through of how Git works. Have you ever used Git before? Right, what was I saying? Is it time for our next command yet? Yes, of course it is. Our next command is something called git log. And there we go. If we type git log, we can see we've got a history of commits that we've made. So this commit has a commit hash or commit ID, and it's got an author. So it says here, this is the author of the person who made the commit. It's got a date. This is when I made the commit. And it's got my commit message. And if you use Git frequently, this log will grow longer and longer and longer every time you make a change. But it shows you basically a history of all of the commits you've made and all the changes you've made, which can be incredibly helpful, especially when you're working on a team and different people are making different changes. Now, I'm going to stop talking about an abstract case for Git at the moment, and I'm going to show you specifically a simple way of using Git for Unity. And to do that, I'm just going to remove my Git project and start with a clean one again. So we're back to having a clean repository. My GitLab file is back. It's currently untracked again. And if I type git log, I have no commits yet, so my log is empty. Okay, so there is one thing that I skipped over briefly, which can be very helpful. So we're going to talk about a gitignore file. When you are looking at all of these files in your Unity project, you actually don't need to track all of these files. If I were to do git add and then a dot, which means basically add everything, it's going to take a little while because there's actually a ton of files in this project. Specifically, I am talking about the logs directory and the library directory. And the temp directory for that matter. We're getting some line ending notices. Okay, great. So now if I do another git status after having added all of that, you can see this is going to show us every single file in your project. And there are loads. Like just tons. They don't even fit in my history. There's so many files. If I have a quick look at how many files there are 23,000 files in that project. And this is a very small project. This is basically, I've created a new project with Unity. I've got some shader graph shaders, and I've got maybe 5 or 6 scripts and 10 image files, something like that. It's a very small project. So I don't really need 23,000 files tracked in my project. So I'm going to use a command called git reset, and that's going to untrack all my files again. Now, there are a bunch of folders that you do not need to include in your project. I've mentioned the library and the logs and the temp directory. They're full of files, and you don't actually need them. I can delete them right here, right now, restart Unity, and it will just recreate them again. They're just directories that Unity stores files in as you're using it, but they're not files that really impact your game in any way. They're just making your Unity editor run faster and more efficiently. So we are going to get something called a gitignore file, and there's a great website called gitignore.io. So I'm just going to open that in a new tab. And this is a service for generating gitignore files for different projects. And so I'm just going to type in Unity, and this is linked in my notes as well, so you can get the reference files here if you don't want to remember these URLs. I'm going to create a gitignore file for Unity, and that gives me this file. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to download this file into my project. In fact, no, I'm just going to create a new file. How do I do that with the file manager? I'll just do it in the terminal. So I'm going to use a command that is that's called touch, and I'm going to say .git ignore. And if I show my hidden files, you can see here I've got my git ignore file, and then I'm just going to paste the contents from that website. So I've got that in here. I'm going to look at this in a second. We've got some notes at the top. Anything, like as before, anything with a hash is just a comment. This is just helpful information. But this file was created by the gitignore site that we were using. We can edit it with the template tool there. And this gitignore file should be placed at the root of a Unity project directory. Yeah, so there you go. You've got some information about what this file is. And basically what this file is it's telling Git about a bunch of directories and files and extensions that we don't care about. The important stuff is at the top here. So basically saying the library directory, and this notation just basically says if you type library with a capital L or a lowercase l, they'll both get ignored. So ignoring the library directory, the temp directory, the object directory, any directory called build or builds, anything with logs, or anything with user settings. And that basically means that any of these directories, we're just going to ignore them. Git doesn't care about them, we don't care about anything. And then just some helpful ones as well. So memory captures, recordings, Rider plugin, anything from a Visual Studio, anything with Gradle. So these are just suggestions. You might not actually have any files like this in your project, or APK, ABB, app. So these are builds, Android builds, crash reports, all sorts of other files. Basically any of these things, if you have them, you probably don't care about them. If you wanted to include them in Git, you can just remove them from this git ignore, and you can also add other things to it. I'm just going to start by saving that and showing you how that's impacted our Git status. So if I do Git status again, you can see that this list of files is much shorter than this list of files. A bunch of directories have just been ignored. And if I do my git add again, you can see I have much fewer files. If I count them again, I have 161 files. So I've basically just gotten rid of 23,000 files that would have just clogged up your version control, taken up space on your computer. You don't care about them, you don't need them. Gone. Basically all you care about is your assets, your project settings, and most people wouldn't have a CI folder there. But yeah, your assets, your project settings. Ooh, here's one that we don't want. So this actually here, this IDEA directory is another one we're going to remove. I'm just going to do a reset on that. Now it's no longer being tracked. Yep, gone. This is another directory that's generated by my IDE, by my editor. So I'm using Rider as my editor, and it stores its settings for the project in that folder. So I'm actually going to go into my .gitignore file. I'm going to add a line down here for .idea. Save that. And I'll run git status again. It's realized I've modified my gitignore file, and that's something we'll look at more in a little bit. But you can see that it's no longer looking for that directory. That .idea directory is gone. Git no longer cares about it. It's received its message. So we have a new Unity project, we have no commits in Git, and we have a gitignore file. And now, well, welcome home, Silver. Good to see you. Glad you made it. And now what we're going to do is we're actually going to make our first commit. We're going to do git commit, give it a message, And we're going to say created a new Unity project. Git status. Ah, you see I've forgotten something very important there. You can see my git status, nothing's changed. It's because I didn't actually add anything. So if you try and commit something with a git commit command, but you've got nothing staged to be commit, so there's no files that you're saying would have actually changed, it's just not going to do anything. And here, it actually has a little message for you. Nothing added to commit, but untracked files present. Use git add to track. So the commit didn't work. But if we do git add first, add everything to being staged, all of these files will now be included in the next commit. I can then do my git commit. It gives me a little summary. So it says, auto-packaging the repository in the background for optimum performance. Thank you, Git, that's helpful. So, created a new Git repository, 150 files changed, 37,000 insertions, that means 37,512 lines of code added to Git. And it's just going through and it's giving an update on every file. So all of these files were created. So Git did not know they existed beforehand. Now Git knows they've existed. And if I type git status again, it tells me we're on branch master, nothing to commit, and working tree is clean. This basically means is that everything in your Git repository is currently tracked and unchanged. This is a clean state. This is a good state. This is what we want. SilverJ says, you said you really just need assets and project files. Well, that's basically all a Unity project is. So if you have a look at the folder structure, in Unity, it automatically creates an assets folder for you, which is where you store all of your assets. So that's scriptable, that's scripts, that's music, that's art, that's shaders, it's tile maps, it's scenes, it's settings. All the stuff that you build within Unity Editor. In fact, if you're working in Unity, you can't even navigate the file browser into a directory other than assets. Everything you do in Unity lives in this assets folder, as far as you're concerned as a user. Now, there are other things that are important in Unity. So if you look at your build settings, you add your scenes to the project. You can do your player settings, you can configure things like your company name, the project name, you can configure icons and things. Whenever you're making changes to settings in Unity, that gets stored, not in the assets directory, but that gets stored in the project settings directory in one of these files. So for example, things like player project settings. This file here, there we go, company name, default company, product name, GDFG 17. All of the stuff that you change in the editor goes in this directory. So basically, when it comes to backing up your game, from Unity's point of view, all you really need is this assets directory and this project settings directory. That's basically more or less it. Everything else that Unity cares about, well, a few files here, so like your C# project files, the editor file, things like that. But yeah, everything else, I could delete everything else and restart Unity, and Unity would just look at those files and generate all of the other folders from the information in those files. Yeah. So you can see here, my project settings files are all included here, and my assets are all included here. But again, this is stuff that you don't really need to know about. The thing is, you generate a gitignore file for Unity. It tells you in it which folders you want to ignore, and you just trust it. You trust that the gitignore file, that somebody else has thought about that they know best, and that it's probably fine for you to use. And it mostly is. So you don't really need to know about Unity's, file generation in that much detail. You just need to know where you get the pieces to make it work. Right, so git status. So let's do a quick recap. So far, what we've done is we've created a new Git repository for our Unity project. We've included a gitignore file to make sure that the directories we don't care about don't get included. And so the next thing we're going to do is we're actually going to back up / share our code with the world by creating a GitHub project. Yeah, that makes sense for the order. Because basically what we've done now is we've basically saved our project as it is. So what we can do is we can send it to a cloud storage like GitHub, and then we could download it from GitHub to another computer. So basically what you could do is you could transfer your project to another computer that you have, or to your friend's computer, or to your teammates, and they would get exactly what you've got in front of you without having to copy and paste files to either a USB or to Dropbox or anything like that. But you can share the files with the world, or just with yourself if all you wanted to do is just back them up for later. So to do that, I'm going to start by going to github.com. And I probably shouldn't be showing this page. Right, let's go to create a new repository. Okay, so I'm already logged into GitHub, by the way. Normally what would happen is normally if you go to github.com, what you have to do is you have to click on either sign up or sign in, enter username and password, or create an account if you're new, that sort of thing. I'm already signed in, and I've clicked on create a new project. Now you want to give your project a name. So I'm going to call this one How to Git. New project How to Git will be created. I can give it a description. This is just for myself. You don't have to do this, but a Unity project managed by Git. And then I'm going to decide, is it public or is it private? So this is actually quite important when you're building stuff with Unity. Silverday says, the super useful part of Git, sharing it. I agree. I would go so far as to say that if you're not a technical-minded person and all you want to do is back up your project, just copy and paste it onto a hard drive and do that repeatedly. This using Git would be faster, but really I think using Git will always make your life better, but it's another skill you need to learn, and it might not be the most important skill. Using this time, you might be better off learning art or something else. But if you ever want to work with anyone else on a project, learn Git, because it makes it just so much more powerful than having to share files manually. Anyway, when you're doing, when you're working in Unity, very often you will be using assets that you've bought and paid for. This could be tools, this could be art, this could be music, but basically, unless it's completely free and publicly available, that anyone can download it, if you've paid for it, you want to make your Git repository private. Because by buying someone else's assets and using them, you have the right to use them yourself, but you do not have the right to distribute them. If you make a public Git repository and you include other people's licensed assets in that, then what you are essentially doing, even if nobody downloads it, what you are essentially doing is you are distributing somebody else's work, and that's not okay. So unless you are writing something completely from scratch, or you're doing something that you want to do as a demonstration for someone else, or you want to, doing something that you're planning to share with the world in general, make sure it's private. And GitHub lets you create private repositories for free, so you don't have to worry about that. I have not using any assets in this project, and it's not really even a proper full project yet. The assets I've used are all completely free so far, art-wise, so I'm actually going to make this a public repository. You can add a README file. That can be quite useful. I'm not going to, because I actually already have a README file in the repo. There it is. I've written some notes about the project in there. So I'm not going to create one, but if you're starting a project completely from scratch, feel free to include a README file. You can add a gitignore file here. That's really helpful. And if I search for Unity, it actually has the Unity gitignore here. Look at that. That is super helpful. So again, we've just downloaded it and added it to the project. But if you hadn't, you can just get GitHub to do that for you. I'm going to select none. And you can choose a license. So I think I could license this under Creative Commons, but I'm not going to, just because I don't want to say anything that's wrong. So I'm not going to leave the license off for now. So I'm going to create my repository. And I don't think I've mentioned repository yet, but repository is a word that is used in Git basically just as a, it's an instance of a project. That's a good way of putting it. So basically a repository is all of the Git information that is being collected. So when you're working with Git on your local computer, you have got a Git repository. And when you create one on GitHub, GitHub also becomes a repository. Because basically you can make changes to your local version, and then your local version will be different to the version on GitHub. But you can keep these two versions in sync by pushing and pulling changes, and we'll get onto that in a minute. But repository just basically means an instance of your code. So if you've got a version of your project and GitHub has one and your friend has one, technically that's 3 different repositories. But it's all the same really as far as GitHub's concerned. Just imagine that repository is basically synonymous with just your project. It's a place where stuff is stored. But yeah, okay, anyway. You've created your empty GitHub project, and it gives you a lot of information. And actually, this is really useful because there's a lot of commands that in Git that I'm teaching you now that you will probably only use once or twice per project. So some of the commands, specifically Git Init here, is a command that you will only ever use at the start of your project. And as long as your project lives, you're probably not going to use that command again. So you're probably going to forget it. But you don't have to go looking it up again. You can just see what GitHub tells you. You can just go create a new project on GitHub and just follow these instructions. Because you've got 2 sets of instructions here. We've got instructions for if you're creating a new repository on the command line. So basically, if you haven't yet created a project, or if you're pushing an existing repository from the command line. And basically what that means is I already have a repository locally. I've already created my Git project and I've already made commits. I'm just now pushing that version to GitHub. So then you use these commands. If you haven't yet done anything locally, these are the commands you've used. And actually, if you check, we've got Git Init, we've got a Git add command for a README, we've got a Git commit command here for making our first commit. These are things that I've already shown you. Now the next command is one that we haven't done yet. And I wasn't sure if I wanted to get onto branches in this talk. In fact, I'm not going to get onto branches, so I'm going to ignore this one. But we'll get onto branches at a later date. If people have questions about branches. I just think it's not necessarily the first couple of things you need to learn about. Now we're going to talk about Git remotes. Because that is the next step for us here. So this is our set of instructions. We've already created a project, so we want to follow these ones. So the next command we're going to look at is git remote add. And here we go. Lecture 6. I'm going to have to create new slides for this video, but that's fine. Create a new project on github.com. We're going to create our account, create a new project, public versus private. Here we go. Git remote. Add a remote repository for your project. So we're going to copy and paste the command that GitHub has talked to us about. And I'm going to talk you through it. So the command is git remote add origin and then this URL. So this URL here is this is where your Git project lives on the internet. And if you look here, that's actually not the URL I was thinking. Oh, here we go, SSH. Let's leave that for now then. Okay, this is basically where your project lives on the internet. So what the command is doing, a remote... Okay. So we spoke about repositories already. Repositories are different instances of your project. And now when you're working with Git on your computer, you are working with your local repository, the files that are on your computer and your version of it. A remote is basically a repository that is not on your computer, but that is somewhere else. So when you're dealing with Git remote commands, what you're basically telling Git is you're telling Git about repositories that are elsewhere. Now the git remote add command does just that. It adds a remote. So it basically tells Git, I'm adding another version for you to know about. Origin is just a name. So by convention, origin is meant to be the most important repository. And when you're working with a team, you need to know whose repository is the most important one, whose is the source of truth, whose repository is the one that everyone else inherits from. And what's important about that is if different repositories are making different changes, you need to know whose changes are the most important ones. Like whose are the, if they have multiple changes that are conflicting or that are changing the same file, you need to know which one's the most important. And in the standard Git workflow, you would say that the GitHub version is the origin, is the source of truth. And basically what happens is different people make changes to the GitHub one, and then everyone pulls those changes down because they accept that once something is on GitHub, then everybody wants that version of things. So origin is just a name. So you could call it anything. You could call it GitHub. You could call it stinky pile of poo. You could call it, it's just a name. But origin is the convention, and that's what we're going to leave it as. And then if you look at the URL, it's just github.com/yanniboy/how-to-git, which is actually just the URL for the website as well. We're getting to your project on the website. And then .git. So this is just basically telling Git where the repository lives. Long-winded way to explain a command, but there we have it. Now, if we do git remote with a -v, that's basically just saying, tell me what remotes we've got configured. And so we can see here, we've got origin, we've got two entries here. It's the same URL for fetch and for push. And so that just means that, in theory, you could have two separate ones there. But basically, we know that our origin remote lives at this URL. Now, if we do git status, it hasn't actually changed anything. Our project hasn't done anything. We've just basically told Git, there is another repository. It's on GitHub. We've called it origin. That is all. Now, the final thing we have to do is we have to push our code. And to do that, we use git push. Isn't that amazing? But yeah, there's two concepts when there is moving code between repositories. The two commands are git push and git pull, and they're very straightforward. When you're pushing, you are taking things that are close to you, so on your machine, and you are sending them outwards. So when you're pushing commits, you're basically saying, I want my changes to be sent to the origin, to other people. They should be stored and backed up and updated. And when you're pulling, what you're saying is, I want changes that other people have made, and I want to have them on my machine. If I do a git push now, it tells me, fatal. The current branch master has no upstream branch. To push the current branch and set the remote as upstream, use this command. And that's just basically saying, I've told it git push, it doesn't know where to push my code. So what I'm going to do now is, I could just run git push origin master. And that's basically saying I want to git push origin, that's the remote I want to send it to, and master is what I want to send. Because if you look at Git Status, you can see I am on branch master. So all of my current changes are on this branch of Git called master. But I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do git push origin master with the set upstream flag. And basically what that's going to say is that anytime I run git push in the future, I want you to remember that what I mean is git push upstream master. And now it's just going to ask me to sign in. Would help if I knew my password. Support for password authentication was removed, blah, 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 access token. Okay, that's really helpful, GitHub. So by default, that's very helpful. So basically what GitHub is saying is, we told you to use this directory, this link to your repository, and then it's saying, but you can't actually use it because it's not secure, which is very helpful. So I'm trying not to unload too much information at once on people. But basically there's two different ways that GitHub gives you for accessing your code or your repository. There's an HTTPS protocol, which is just using a website transfer. And there's SSH, which is secure shell transfer. And they're basically different ways of authenticating that it is you who's making those changes, because it's important for people that Git knows exactly, well, that GitHub in this case knows exactly who is making the changes, and make sure that people who shouldn't make changes to it can't do that. I'm not going to go into the details of this. There's plenty of documentation on how to do this on the internet, and I will link to that later. But basically, I'm going to switch to using SSH. So I've just removed the origin remote and added it with a different URL. So if you check now, you can see that yeah, you can see basically that the links have changed and they're a different format now. So I'm going to try and push again now. One of these times it's going to work. Right, and now it's asking me to authenticate with my password for my private key. Just ignore that it's done that. But basically it's asked me to log in for GitHub. And now it's sending the files up. Okay. Now we've got some more information on our git status command. It tells us your branch is up to date with origin master. And so it's telling us that our version locally is up to date with whatever is on GitHub master. If I refresh the page, I'm still on just the project page on GitHub. And now it's showing me, now that I've pushed some code, it's showing me all of the files that are on my local computer. So it's showing me all of my assets. It's showing me all of my project settings. It's got my gitignore file from earlier that we worked with. And I can actually look through this and I can see all of my scripts and I can see all of the meta files and I can look at them in the web browser. So if I go into my art test directory and I look at my ship PNG, look, there's the image for my ship. So literally all of the files for my project are now on the internet. Nice coffee mug. Thank you. What coffee mug? I can't see a coffee mug. You must be seeing things, Silverjay. I noticed it updates the code in the help section so you can still copy and paste. Yep. So this is the thing about Git. Git is always trying to give you the information you need to move forward. So currently, there's nothing to commit. The working tree is clean. So Git thinks there's nothing for you to do. There's nothing at all for you to do here. Now, the next command we want to look at, and Git will tell us this as well in a second. I don't have a slide for it. Yeah, I don't think I have a slide for it anywhere. That's a shame. Oh well, I'll have to create a slide for that. But fine, the next command we're going to use is we're going to use the pull command. And just like the push command, it is just git pull. So, ignore the auto packaging thing. Is it going to tell me that every single time? That's annoying. Huh. Okay, so all of this you can just ignore because you probably wouldn't be getting that on your computer. I don't know why I'm getting those. So that's fine. The important message here is already up to date. So I'm running my git pull command and it's telling me already up to date. And I know that it will because if I do git status, it's telling me we are up to date with origin master. Now, if I were to go on GitHub, and GitHub actually lets me change files without downloading them to my computer. I can actually change files on the website. I can go to my README file and I can edit it. And I can just put some spaces in there. I've made a change to the file that Git can be aware of. I could add some extra text in here. Something along the lines of, the game is about cats driving taxis. That is some extra information. It's telling me I can do a git commit with this. I can commit my changes. So I could say, it gives me a default option here, updated README file. I'm going to put a little bit more information in there than that. So I'm going to say this is added game description to README file. And the options I have here is I can commit this directly to my master branch, or I can create a new branch. We're not talking about branching strategy right now, so I'm just going to commit it directly to the master branch and commit my changes. So I've just edited a file and committed the changes to Git on the website through the editor. That means I've made changes to Git, which these changes could have been made by another person and pushing their changes to GitHub. It could have come from anywhere. But basically, the GitHub remote origin has changed now. And so I would obviously want those changes on my computer as well. So if I do a git status, it is still telling me that I am up to date with my origin master. That is because Git doesn't automatically check for changes every time you run a command. There is a Git command called git fetch, which basically is just check what's on the other remotes and tell me if there are changes. If I run the git fetch command, it is telling me now compressing files, unpacking files, how to get here from github.com changes on the master branch origin master. I really should get rid of these errors. I don't like the look of these errors. Auto packaging repository in the background from performance. Git help CG for manual housekeeping. Clean up necessary files. Stop it. Auto cleanup will not be performed until the file is removed. So .git gc log. Okay. Anyway, I did my git fetch command, which if I run it again will now tell me that there are no changes. Yeah, no changes. If I do my git status, it should now tell me your branch is behind origin master by 1 commit and can be fast forwarded. Use git pull to update your local branch. So what that means is that you can check the logs for this as well, so you can see what's going on. If I do a git log command, it tells me I have 1 commit on my current branch. If I do git log and then tell it origin master, this basically is saying is I want you to give me the log of the master branch on the origin remote. It's telling me here now there's another commit on origin master. And git status is always telling you what is helpful to be done. So it's saying use git pull to update your local branch. So now if I do git pull, it will pull all those files, all those changes to my local machine. It's telling me here, readme.md 2++, that's basically saying it's added 2 lines to the file, 1 file changed, 2 insertions. I check my git log, I now have 2 commits, and if I have a look at the readme file, I can see here, the game is about cats driving taxis, so it's changed the file for me. If that doesn't make much sense, have a look here. I look at my readme file on my local computer. There it is. The game is about cats driving taxis, so the file is changed on my computer now. And that's basically the gist of Git. What you do is you make changes on your computer, you commit them, you send them to GitHub, other people do the same, you pull them down again, and that's how you share code. I'm going to do a quick example of what I would do on my computer if I was making changes not through GitHub. I've got a little script here. The script is called destructible tiles. And basically this script is responsible for, in the game, when I shoot a laser beam at certain things, it removes them from the game. If I press play, I've got a fun little laser there, and when I shoot things, it gets rid of them. And that's what the destruction does. Now, I might think, this doesn't quite make sense. I think other people working on this file might be confused about what's going on. So I could put some comments in here. First of all, let's check this file on GitHub. If I look at GitHub, I can see that the file is in assets, destructiblestyles.cs. Here it is, the same as it is on my computer. So now, if I edit it on my computer, for instance, if I wanted to say destroy tile, this is a method. I'm just going to put a little comment on here and say this will clear tiles from the tile map and then update the shadows. So first of all, I'm in an IDE. My IDE knows about Git, and that's quite nice because what it's doing here is it's got this little green bar at the side. Not sure if you can see that. Let me just make this a bit bigger. So you can see here I've got a little green bar next to the comment I've added. So basically this is Git telling me you've added some lines. So I can undo these changes using this rollback button, and it gets rid of them again. But it's green because I'm adding new content. I could also, for example, rename this method and call it destroy tiles, tile, and shadow. Now I've edited code. I've made changes to existing code. And what it shows me now is it shows me what it looked like before and after the change. Or update shadows in game. Let's tell me I've made an edit here. and it tells me what it was before and what it was after. Then down here, I could remove this file. Now I've got a little red arrow here saying I've removed some code. If I click on that, it shows me this is the code that I've removed. This is how powerful Git can be while you are making changes in your project. It shows you exactly what has changed since your last commit. And I can even show this in the terminal. So I've made some changes to this file. If I type git status, Git is going to tell me the status of my project. That's telling me I've got one file that's been modified. And of course, Git is always telling you what it wants, what it thinks you should be doing. So you can either say git restore, git add file to update that, to update what will be committed. So that's basically to stage it. I can add this file to be staged, or I can do git restore file to discard changes in the working directory. So I could do git restore on this file, and that would undo all of my changes. Similarly to if I nope, I don't want you to show me the annotations. There. Similarly to if I were to just click on this arrow here to restore them here. Now, there's an additional command that's super helpful in Git, and that is git diff. And what git diff does, it basically tells you what is the difference between what my current commit is and the changes I've made to the project. So if I do that, this is now going to go through this file. So you can see here, we're looking at assets destructible tiles, and it's going to go through the file and show me what changes I've made. So we can see here, actually, let's just undo this particular one. We've got an add, an edit, and a remove here. So git diff, what shows me here, I've added a comment. These 3 lines are green. I've got pluses here. Pluses means I've added new code that will be staged. Then here I've got an edit. It's got a minus and a plus. It tells me I've removed this line and I've replaced it with this line. Essentially all I've changed is this string over here. I've added this little bit of text. But Git will just, in the diff, it'll just show me I've removed this whole line and I've added this whole line. And similarly down here, this laser gun, I've just removed this line. It's all in red, there's a minus. So basically, this is all of the changes I've made to this file. Now, I don't actually want to break my project, so I'm going to roll this back. Roll this back. I'm just going to add this comment. And if I do my git diff again, much smaller diff this time. If I do my git diff again, you can see here that I've just added this comment. These 3 lines are new. This will clear tiles from the tile map and then update the shadows. So I have reviewed my changes. I'm happy with them. I do want to include them. What I can do now is I can just do git add dot. No message there, no errors. But if I do git status again, you can see that these changes are going to be committed. So my file is now in green. That's the file I've changed. I've made changes to it. This would say either removed or created if it was a new file or if I deleted it. But currently I've just modified the file. So it's different, it's changed. And the next step is to commit. So again, I'm going to do a git commit. And I'm going to do a message. And my message is added comment to script. Here we've got it. Made the commit. 1 file changed. 3 insertions. Back to git status. Now we've got a new message here. We've got your branch is ahead of origin master by 1 commit. Previously, when we made the changes on GitHub, we were behind. Now we are ahead. And of course, as always, Git is telling us what it wants us to do. Use git push to publish your local commits. So it tells us we are ahead of origin master by 1 commit. And we know that we are ahead because on GitHub, which is here, we don't have that comment that we've just created. However, if I now do a git push, Give it a second. There we go. So we have gives us a bit of stuff about the compression of it, what's happening on here, and okay, we're sending to github.com how to git. This is a change in the commit ID, and we're just pushing stuff to basically it's just push the files up. You don't need to know what all this data is. It's irrelevant, but we've updated the files. And now if I refresh this file on GitHub, there's our comment. There we go. It is as easy as that. Back to our trusted Git status. Your branch is up to date with origin master. Everything is clear. Boom. Done. Problem solved. Now, I'm going to do another change to my project, and I've been using the terminal a lot, and not everybody is particularly comfortable with using the terminal. And I'm aware of that, and that's fine. I love using the terminal. I think once you've learned all the commands, it is a really quick and easy way of getting by, and it's really helpful. But let's say you are not a technical person, you do not want to type commands, you just want to have your Git project work nicely. So what we're going to do for that is GitHub has a program called GitHub Desktop. Which you can download for Windows. You can also get it for Mac, I think. It's not easy to get on Linux. I have managed to get a version so I can show it. But yeah, so it's basically a tool for managing your Git project that doesn't require you to use the terminal. So if I open GitHub Desktop, there we go. Great. So let me have a look. This is not what it should normally open. Right, well, it already has our project included. Normally what you'd have to do to get your project into GitHub Desktop is you want to add a local repository, choose the folder, find the right one, and add it in. It's already got mine in here because I was using it earlier. So you can see here, if I click on, so up here you can see which project you've got. So I've only got one project here, but if I wanted to add another one, I could create a new repository, add an existing repository, clone something from the internet. I'm going to add a local one. I'm just going to choose a different project I've got. Let's go with, yeah, Freshy Boy. Cool. So now I've got a different repository project. I can see a long Git history of all the changes that I've made and things like that. But anyway, you want to select the project you're working on. So in our case, it's how to Git. And you can see in the history tab, you can see all of our different commits here. You can even click through them and see the changes that were made in each of the commits. And you can get an overview of what the changes are. Now, if you click on this changes tab, this is basically the graphic equivalent of Git status. So currently, no local changes. There are no changes. No changes here, nothing. That's fine. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go into Unity. So I'm not going to change a code script, but I'm actually going to make some changes in the Unity project. So in my sample scene, I'm going to move this ship, my taxi. I'm going to move this around, put it over here. You can see this little star says I've got unsaved changes. I'm going to save it. And I'm going to go back into GitHub Desktop. So now we can see a file has been changed, one changed file. So this file is asset scene sample scene. So this is basically this is the scene I've just been working in. I can show the diff, but it's a Unity file, so you don't really care about it. You can see these are all the changes I've made. So I've moved the position of my object, and some mesh files have changed, and some lighting has changed. You don't care. It's a Unity file. These aren't really human readable. These are for Unity to read. They're not for you to edit. But you can see that that file has changed. And if I go to the terminal and do a git status, you can see it here too. This file has been modified. Now, there's a little bit of a commit message down here. There's a little box here. You can type either use the defaults it's given you, so update sample scene with a description. I'm just going to type in here moved taxi starting position and click commit to master. Boom, done. I've got no local changes because I've made all my commits. If I look at my history, I can see here, this is the changes I've just made. Similarly to the Git terminal, GitHub desktop is always telling you what things you want to do. This blue box here, push commits to remote origin. You have one local commit waiting to be pushed to GitHub. And you can say, okay, fine, that makes sense. I'm going to go back over to GitHub and check. In GitHub, you can look at your history, which is basically your list of commits. You can see here, for assets, no, not for assets, here we go. On our project, these are our 3 commits that we've made previously. We've got a new one in GitHub desktop. So I'm going to push that to the origin. It's thinking about it. There we go. It's pushed it. And now if I go up here and refresh the page, you can see move taxi starting position. My change has just been pushed, committed 1 minute ago, and it's on the internet. Question from Chippergoo. Does GitHub have a limit to how large files you can store? Yes, it does. I believe the limit is 500 megabytes for any one file. And that is not a GitHub limitation, that is a Git limitation. So Git itself cannot track a single file if that single file is larger than 500 megabytes. Now, depending on what you're doing with Unity, I would question why you have an individual file that is larger than 500 megabytes, but there is a solution to that problem. It is called LFS, and it's basically Git LFS, which is large file storage. So Git large file storage is an extension that you can use to upgrade Git to use large files. There's instructions on it. I wasn't going to cover it in this discussion, but you know, if you've got questions, we can dig into that. But basically what it does is it will store large files slightly separately to the way that it stores the rest of your project. But once it's set up, you just commit and push your files to GitHub the same way you would if you didn't have LFS set up. It's a really quick setup. You basically you install the app, the add-on. You tell it which files you want it to track. So similar to the gitignore file, you'd have a git attributes file which stores the different files that you want to track that you think are going to be large. This could be textures, shaders, meshes, Photoshop documents, large asset file, large image files, large music files. I mean, again, I've never used Git LFS for a Unity project because I've never needed to, just because I don't find that I end up with huge files. GitHub does have some usage limits where the free version that you're using, if you're using the free unpaid version of GitHub, and you are uploading, and you have a private repository, so you've made your files private, and you are uploading a ton of large files all of the time, then you might hit their usage caps, and you might have to pay for your repository a couple of dollars a month, I think is what they charge. It's not very expensive for small teams, for independent developers. Like I said, I've never run into it. I've never had to pay for it. It just works for me. It might be that I don't make big enough games to warrant it. I don't know. I'm not as experienced as a developer in that regard. But I'm pretty sure, one, if you're using public GitHub repos, their usage caps are much higher. So if you can make your project public, That's the way to get around it, or you've got to pay a couple of bucks. Or you can use GitLab rather than GitHub, which works exactly the same way but has different usage caps, and you probably won't hit those. But like I said, there's a solution to the problem. I know lots of developers who have incredibly large games that still use Git for their version control, and I know that lots of AAA studios will use similar tools as well. They'll spend more money on it, but it's not that Git isn't capable of doing it. There are solutions to that problem. If that answers your question, Chibbergoo. What was I looking at? I was looking at GitHub Desktop. So for me, I don't like using tools like GitHub Desktop because I actually find them slightly harder to use. Right, quick message in chat. Can anybody hear me? I feel like the stream just went down. Okay, it looks like... Okay, yes, you're still there. Great, thanks, Chippergoo. Cool. Yada, yada, yada. So you are saying I hit the limitation by just using Unity's 3D template. Cool. Let me see if I can help you with that. Just a bit of lag. We're good. It's just, I'm new to streaming to YouTube, and so when OBS tells me it disconnected and is reconnecting, I'm like, is the whole stream going to die? I don't know. Fine, I'm glad you're still here. So... if Nightbot is watching, why don't you jump on the Discord, and after the stream, maybe even tomorrow, because it's getting late my end, we can have a chat and I can see if I can help you figure out your usage limits on GitHub. Because it shouldn't be a problem. It should be very doable. There might just be some setting that you've got to tweak somewhere. But yeah, we can work that out. But yeah, like I was saying, I don't like using the GitHub Desktop because I find it quite hard to find the things that I want to do. Sometimes there's very specific things in Git that I want to do and I just can't find the right thing. However, if you're doing very, very simple stuff like making a bunch of changes in Unity, committing them all, pushing them, pulling them, really simple stuff, like literally make the changes, save them, push it all up. Make the changes, save them, push them all up. Somebody else makes changes, pull them down. GitHub Desktop is more than capable of doing that, and it means you don't have to remember any commands. You just follow the instructions, click on the buttons, do the thing. Go for that. There's nothing wrong with that. But I think for you to use Git sustainably for the future, it makes sense for you to know the ins and outs, like what it's doing, what it's trying to achieve, what the differences are. I think it's valuable. But yeah, I think I've covered everything I wanted to cover as far as the basics go. So open to questions. Like if you guys have questions, like if you've had problems with Git in the past, or if something doesn't make particular sense, chuck them at me. Cool, SilverJ, I've installed Git Bash. Is that basically going to work like the terminal? Absolutely, exactly. I actually quite like Git Bash on Windows because Git Bash gives you a bunch of like Linux tools that you wouldn't normally have on Windows. But yeah, it works exactly the same way. So any of the commands that I've done today, you can run those through the Git Bash. And actually, when you install Git on Windows, let's say you're in a project like this on Windows. I haven't got my Windows computer up, so I can't show it exactly. But when you right-click on a directory, in Linux, I've got open in terminal. On Windows with Git installed, you should have open in Git Bash and open in Git GUI. Git GUI is similar to GitHub Desktop. It's just a graphical user interface for using Git. It's the default one that comes with Git. Again, I dislike it intensely. But if you don't like using the terminal, if you don't like using commands, it will work just with visuals, with buttons and text boxes and no commands. So that is an option for you. But if you're using Windows, I think just take the extra step and install GitHub Desktop. I might do a video or a stream on this in the future, but actually, if you're using an IDE, like I'm using Rider, but if you're using Visual Studio or VS Code or whatever, chances are they will have Git built in off the bat. So I already showed you like the visual tools for that. But if I were to go and make some changes in this and go up to Git, I actually have tools for using Git directly in my IDE. So I can do a Git commit and it pops up and it shows me everything. It shows me which files changed. It shows me where to put the commit message. It shows me like a diff of what I'm changing. Like most programmer tools these days have Git built in. You don't need to necessarily use the terminal separately. But I just wanted to make sure that it's as accessible for everyone as possible. Like if you aren't writing code, for example, like if you're, let's say you're an artist on a team or a musician, you just want to pull down the latest changes. You want to create a folder. You're going to drop music files into it and then just send those back. Literally all you do is you add the music files to the project, you go into GitHub Desktop, it shows you all the files you've added, you type into here, added some music files, hit commit and push. Your job's done. Somebody else can deal with it. Everyone else has your music. Fantastic. Silverjay, version control, here I come. I need that as a quote for the stream. That's fantastic. Cool, so Silverjay, you're starting your journey. Chippergoo, have you got any other issues other than just Git's file storage? Ooh, we're going to be friends, Chippergoo. You've been playing with GitHub Actions. What have you been doing with the GitHub Actions? Because I could show you some stuff. Do you want me to show you some stuff? Not this one. Let's go into GitHub project. Let's go into a slightly different project. Let's go to... won't say no. Cool. So there's a project called Game CI. I don't work with these guys. I don't write any of the code. I just really like what they're doing. So I've actually been making some videos for these tools. There I am. Hey. Teaching developers how to use their tools to build auto-deploy pipelines. And I'll be doing more of that in the future, hopefully, fingers crossed. But basically what Game CI lets you do is you can have GitHub build your Unity games. So build a WebGL build Windows, build Android, store them so you can download those builds from GitHub and share them with your friends. And this particular one is deploying to GitHub Pages, but you can deploy those builds that you've just made to Google Play, to itch.io, to Steam. You can do whatever you want, basically. And that's something that I have quite a lot of fun with and that I want to teach people. And so basically, teaching developers about Git is like step one. Once that is done, I can then make more videos on teaching them how to automate and really improve their development workflow. Like my typical template for any game I make for a jam, and I'm actually working on this now, or I was working on this a few hours ago, is that I will start by going to an itch page. So going to itch.io, and what have I called this one? So yanniboy.itch.io. I think I've just called it taxi. I'll create a blank itch page, and then I will build a pipeline so that whenever I tag a release in Git, it automatically uploads those builds to itch. So currently I've got taxi web stable. That's the web build, WebGL build of the taxi game I'm working on. And if I look at my notifications, you can see here, build web stable 1 for Yellow Cap is now live. And that's basically a notification telling me that my deployment of that game, which happened automatically using the CI tools, went to itch. The first time it will. Cool, Jibbergoo. That means you've watched the other videos. That's fine. Thank you for that. The first time it builds it, it will be really long. And that's because it hasn't cached any of those directories. So at the beginning of the video, I talked about the library, the logs, and the object, all the directories we don't want in Git. And so basically what's happening is when you build your project, it has to build all of those directories from scratch. But if the build is successful, if the WebGL build is successful, it should cache all of those directories, which means the next time you build a WebGL build, it'll be faster. Now, I will warn you, the WebGL build is the slowest one. WebGL is very inefficient with Unity. It takes a long time. So that build does normally take a while. The Linux, Windows, and Mac builds are much faster. So I would reckon a standard Mac build on... what does it take here? So yeah, so my WebGL build here takes 12 minutes. And my Windows build is 5 minutes, and the Android build is 8 minutes. That's because the directories are already cached. It depends. It depends on the game. It depends on, you know, how many render pipeline runs it has to run, how many shaders you've got. There's loads of things that impact it. But with simple games, it can be quite quick. And to be honest, I don't really mind about the time. For me, the time-saving aspect is that I hit git commit, and I tag it, and I hit git push, and I just go off. You know, I can either keep working on something else, or I can go spend time with my family, or I can go eat something, and I know that at some point in the future, all of my builds are going to be in the right place, and the project's going to be updated, and I don't have to do it myself. So I don't really care that it takes 40 minutes sometimes, because it's 40 minutes that I'm not having to do it. Yep, Silverjay, no problem. I don't know when, because I don't have a ton of time, but I'm going to be cutting up this stream and posting it as a video later so that people can just watch just the important bits that actually make sense. I noticed that the iOS build is the reason I hit my limit. The iOS build is 830 megabytes. Okay, cool. So the limit you're hitting there is the GitHub storage limit on artifacts. So when you are building your game, so the build pipeline creates an artifact, and you can see them here. So build Android, build Windows, WebGL. You can see the builds here. So GitHub private repos have a limit to the number of artifacts they will store. The way to get around the limit is to just directly after the build runs, just delete those files, and always delete those files, because GitHub is really annoying. If you hit the limit and then go back and delete the files, it'll still count as you hitting your limit, and you have to pay, and they want you to pay at that point. It's very annoying, but basically if you always delete your files, you shouldn't hit that limit. Another thing you can do to make your files smaller is, as part of your build pipeline, you can just zip the directory and upload the zipped version of it as an artifact. I had a friend whose build of the game is 4 gigabytes, but after he zipped it, it was something like 250. So actually, every single time he built the Windows version, it would instantly hit the limit. But if he zips it first, it doesn't even come anywhere close. So that's another way of getting around it. Yeah, GitHub is really slow with the whole artifacts thing. We spent a while researching how to actually add an action to the pipeline to delete the artifact. Because what you basically want to do for deployment stuff is you want to build the game, you want to upload the artifact, and then in the deploy step, you want to download the artifact and deploy it. And then after you've deployed it, you don't necessarily need to store it in GitHub. So after you've deployed it, you could just delete it. GitHub has an option in their actions for automatically deleting artifacts after a certain time. However, that is measured in days. So the soonest you can delete an artifact automatically is 24 hours, which is pretty useless if you ask me. So there are ways of doing. In theory, you can write your own action for deleting it, or you can make the API calls. But for some reason, GitHub have decided they don't actually want to make it easy for you to automatically delete artifacts as part of the pipeline. So from that point of view, it's just annoying. I actually personally, I use GitLab rather than GitHub. I've said it before, they are very similar services. They're basically the same thing. So GitHub has actions for its CI. GitLab has a CI file for its actions. It's a slightly different format of doing things. But GitLab, its usage limits are based on the number of hours per month that your CI is running. So basically, if you don't build very frequently, or if your builds are quite fast, then you won't hit GitLab's usage limits, and they don't actually have upload limits on their artifacts. So you can store as many artifacts as you want on GitLab, or at least I've never hit them, and I've uploaded many gigabytes in the past. So I use GitLab because, for many reasons, I prefer their CI environment. But if you have private repos on GitHub and the whole artifact storage limit thing is causing you headaches, I would potentially consider switching to GitLab. Or even having your project on GitHub, but doing your CI in GitLab, because you can mirror stuff backwards and forwards if you wanted. That's just my preference, personally. But I do my videos mostly with GitHub because more people use GitHub. Therefore, I want to, help people with the tools that they use most. Cool. Anyway, I'm probably going to call it there. Silverjay, I'm glad you're home. I hope you've had fun driving. I hope you haven't got another big drive coming up anytime soon, put it that way. Chippergoo, it was great having you on. Best of luck with that, and I'll catch you on Discord afterwards to have a chat if you fancy it. And then I don't know when I'll be streaming next. I'm not in a regular rhythm yet. I'm still moving house. I've not even bought the new house yet. I've not even found a new house to move into. We're just currently selling the house. So it's going to be a few more months of just craziness before I get back into a regular pattern with streaming. But I do like streaming, and I'll try and get some more in, and I'll try and do some videos when I find time. So yeah, I shall speak to you guys later. Have a good rest of your afternoon, evening, time zone, wherever you are. And yeah, thanks for spending time with me. Bye.